How's everyone doing today? Welcome, everyone. You have any questions for today? Please you can ask the question anytime in the chat area. So feel free to test it out. Say hello. Let us know where you're from. How did you hear about us? We'll start in a few seconds. Okay. So we have quite a few attendees for today. Did everyone get the link there?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Perfect. Let's see here. So I'll start off while we wait for a few more people to join us today if they have any technical issues. And anyone from on Facebook Live watching this, feel free to ask questions as well. We're monitoring questions from there. And today will be more of a panel, so feel free to ask questions anytime and I'll fit them in. So we're just going to start off today by asking a poll question of how did you hear about us? So there you go. Perfect, perfect. So I am going to get started. Thank you everyone for attending the Dental COVID webinar series hosted by Dentistry Business. Today we are live on Facebook, as I mentioned, as well as YouTube, and we're looking to get live on LinkedIn and Twitter in the future as well. So feel free to take the link, share with your friends, family, kids. It's never too early for them to start learning and helping you out at the practice. The COVID-19 pandemic has caused an economic downturn. Is this a great opportunity to buy a practice, or should you be considering selling your practice before the prices drop substantially? What should you do? So today we have a few guest speakers that will kind of share their perspective with you. But during this recovery process, there are three things you should keep in mind. One is the valuation of your practice. Two is what will the recovery path look like. With Atul, during his presentation, he talks about the different shapes, a V shape, a U shape, an L shape. So I think that's very important. And number three is what will be the financial recovery process. In this webinar, we will talk about how you can learn about the effects of the COVID-19 in the dental practice marketplace. We have 4 panelists who will outline the different aspects you need to consider if you want to buy or sell your practice. Today, I am joined by Zlatin, CEO of Maxident, Atul Mehra, Managing Director of M&Co LLP, and Dr. Anthony Pino, owner of Churchill Dental. So with these webinars, my team and I organize these webinars as a way of helping dental practices learn and adapt to the new normal while we wait until the offices and businesses go back to business as usual, if that actually happens. So now is a very important time for you to prepare as you open. Small things that you learn now can make a big difference in your practice for the future. So it's very important to stay on top of everything that's going on. So we have a huge series of speakers we've done this is our 14th webinars, and we already have another 10 to 15 planned. So our goal is to bring you as much information as possible so you can be prepared. And so the background about myself, I'm the CEO of DentistFind. We are a marketing management company. We help dental practices acquire patients using our platform. So we are like your marketing department. Personally, for me, I also teach the dental marketing social media course at the University of Toronto. And we have over 25 to 30 team members in our company doing continued research and building technology to help you build new patients for your practice. Next, we have Atul. Atul Murad is the founder and managing partner of M&Co Chartered Accountants Professional Corporation. He holds an honors Bachelor of Commerce degree from York University, a designation as a chartered accountant and chartered professional accountant in Ontario, Canada, certified public accountant certification, Illinois in the USA, a certificate in dental practice management from the University of Toronto Faculty of Dentistry, and has completed the Chartered Professional Accountants in-depth tax course, the most comprehensive domestic and international income tax training program in Canada. So in short, anything you need to know about tax or finances, he's probably the smartest guy with the most papers on his wall. So he's the guy to go to. Next is Alex Zlatin. As CEO, he helps struggling dental professionals take control of their practices and reach the next level of success with responsible leadership strategies. Leveraging over 13 years of management and consulting experience, he empowers organizations to become more productive and profitable based on the belief that successful businesses establish a genuine connection with employees, patients, and vendors. This is his third webinar with us. He's so good, such high in demand that we've gone back for the third time, and he draws the most attendees with his webinars, right? So he knows quite a bit. And lastly, we have Dr. Anthony Pino, graduated from the University of Toronto in 2012. He then worked as an associate dentist in Ontario, British Columbia, and Nunavut. He was also a practicing dentist for the Ontario Dental Association's Remote Areas Program, where he provided much needed dental services in remote communities across Northern Ontario. In 2016, he acquired his first dental practice, and in 2019, he acquired a second practice. He enjoys all aspects of practice ownership and delivering the best care to his patients. But most importantly, the most important thing about Anthony is that he has a kid on the way in 4 weeks. Is that?
That's correct. Yes.
Yeah. Will that be your first or?
Yeah.
Nice. Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you.
So everyone, welcome. How is everyone doing today?
Good.
Doing great. Thank you.
Amazing. Very excited for today's webinar to talk to the wonderful people and get some different viewpoints on some very burning questions.
Okay, great. And you're doing good, Atul?
Absolutely. Looking forward to today's discussion. The market's dynamic and resilient, and look forward to getting insight from everyone.
Great. So everyone that's attending, once again, feel free to post any questions, anything you want to know about buying or selling a practice. All of our speakers sign an agreement to always tell the truth, no matter how difficult the question is. So let's get started.
Did we lose Sharky?
So I have a question.
Yeah.
I think we lost Sharky on the most, on like the tip of starting actually kicking it up.
Maybe give him a second.
Let me see. Apparently, there's some people who can't hear, so let's see what platform.
Okay. Sharky? All right. Oh, Sharky. Oh, there he is. Sharky, you're back. We lost you for about
Ron.
2 minutes. Just
As
about,
soon as you were about to kickstart everything.
you were just about to refer to your introduction.
Yeah.
No. Yeah, you introduced, and then you said, okay, let's start with the first question, and then you disappeared.
Thanks.
Sure. Well, this is a loaded question, so everyone, I hope you have your drinks next to you, whether it's a glass of wine, beer, or a glass of tea, like I do. I think from the appraisals that I have seen, goodwill has been probably the most controversial. I think goodwill is something that's very difficult to quantify, and a lot of organizations and people are trying to portray themselves as the authority. The way, in a proper business sense, the way that you assess the value of a business is their reputation, and not necessarily how many dollars did they spend per square feet, per square foot on its design. Which is what usually goes into the goodwill aspect. And this pandemic is probably the best illustration of how offices that have spent hundreds of thousands of dollars in beautiful, stunning design are basically worth almost nothing right now. Or even some, in Montreal, unfortunately, are going out of business. So, this is a very sad situation. But I think that the market pre-COVID, with the private equity money that's been thrown into the industry and the corporations, has actually seen clinic prices skyrocket and be completely out to lunch with reality. Like it's incredible to see how ridiculous some appraisals are. Selling practices with 1,200 patients and word of mouth marketing, and we had a whole webinar on word of mouth marketing. The worth of that, selling for $6, $7, $8, $900,000, where you need to invest at least $200K in equipment renovations, marketing, and everything. So it's absolutely ridiculous. But I think this pandemic, and as we are cautiously trying to recover from this immediate closure, I think that practices that have built that resilience, who have some cash reserves that were able to properly address and adapt to the situation, and throughout the years build real strong relationships with their patients, are ones that are in a position to actually maintain that value, from before going into the pandemic. Whereas offices that have not been
Yeah, that makes sense. How about you, Anthony? What's your kind of thoughts on the valuation?
Mhm. We had a case today actually where a client is looking to purchase a dental practice in Ontario, and the dental associate was in his 70s, and the dentist owner, she was also in her mid 50s, and I think I was reading between the lines, and it kind of looked like maybe some of them might have just said, you know what, I'm done with this, and I'm ready to move on to other areas of their career. So timing is huge.
Okay. And speaking of charting, we actually have a perfect webinar tomorrow. Dr. Raz saying he will be talking about making it easy and efficient and complete to document everything digitally. So he has a process that he goes through and the application that he uses. So actually perfect timing for tomorrow if people want to tune in, same time. So for my prediction, I see that in the short term, it will go down as the profit margins get squeezed, and as you're saying, Alex, a lot of dentists start retiring, or early retirement because of the age, and there's a lot of uncertainty, so people can't make a purchase. I think this is a good opportunity to buy a practice during this time, and over the long term, I agree with you, Atul, that there will be a market price. Right. I mean, if the margins are squeezed, dentists will leave the industry and say, hey, I can do better someplace else. And the fees will go up, and eventually there will be a market price. So overall, in the long term, prices will go back and higher as well. As there's already been a pretty high demand for practices, it will continue after a couple of years once we have these things sorted, 1 or 2 years. Right? So that's kind of my kind of based on the data that I see, that's where I see direction going. But in the short term and in the long term, there will be some practices that benefit and some that don't benefit. So what factors would you say would lead to the ones that are benefiting, such as location, such as in, let's say, high buildings with escalators and major intersections and so on, right? So which factors you see will increase the value and which factors will decrease the value of practice? So let's start with you, Anthony, on that.
Definitely help with that.
Okay. So how about you, Alex? So which factors do you think will increase the value or decrease the value of a practice? Okay, so Atul, so how about you? What factors do you think will increase or decrease the value during COVID?
Yeah, I think to echo what Alex had said, I think, and dentists have been really good at this in terms of staying at the front lines of technology and infection control, and globally. In Ontario and in Canada, we've been great at ensuring that we're ahead of the curve. So by continuing to do that, they can maintain the value of their business. But I agree with the narrative of communicating safety and how your practice is participating in helping to ensure a safe environment, educating the patients about the virus, increasing the dental IQ of the patients through education, and continuing to pursue that as a method to help portray safety as a standard and as a way to keep the momentum going, and I think that's key. And that can also be part of the marketing strategy, just in terms of building out that message of education, safety, and infection control. And there's a lot of people that may not be up to date on all that stuff, and they may not be up to date on all the issues that are relevant. And I think it's important for dentistry to continue to lead in that area, to continue to maintain the valuation.
Okay, great. So, from a marketing point of view, I think that it's going to be difficult for some practices. It's going to have an effect on all practices, but it'll be difficult for some practices to get new patients. Some practices, pretty much all practices, will lose some number of patients or have some lower amount of procedures, and they need to, if they want to sustain the same revenue profit, they would need to bring in more new patients. I think the ones that are successful are the ones that have a marketing strategy set up. And the thing with marketing strategy is that I work with a lot of dental offices on creating their strategy. It takes a while to set up, to see what works for you, what works for the staff, what works for the community. So the valuation of the practices that have a strategy in place, that have an Instagram where they are constantly updating, communicating, educating, have a Google AdWords or a Facebook account, have a marketing company, have a website that are generating traffic, that are ranking, those will succeed. What I've seen in the advertising space is that a lot of dental offices spend on advertising. And that is the biggest mistake, because you need to set things in place and start getting those patients or setting a strategy up. So that's one expenses that dental offices think they can eliminate, right? Because everything's going up, the staff and everything. I'm taking less money, so let's cut advertising. So this is a good opportunity for the other practices who do have the extra funding to start advertising, start the marketing strategy. So what I've seen with the statistics, I think you mentioned this, Atul, about the stats with Alex's software. What I've seen actually with our system, we track phone calls. Now phone calls coming to office. So what we've seen is that in the last couple of months, the calls dropped substantially, right? Which is kind of given. But what has gone up are searches and traffic to the website, which is strange. So people are looking around. Patients are shopping around, seeing which dental offices, even though they're not booking, but they're preparing to book. So this is the most important part for dental offices, to start optimizing for all the social medias and the search engines, communicating and start advertising, and kind of take a big bite out of the new patients, right? So that's from a marketing perspective. So let's move to our next question. How are the increase in supplies and equipment going to affect the valuation of dental practices?
Anthony, have you seen what have you seen out there on your end in terms of the costs of the PPE? Are you seeing any deals, or is it like ridiculous now still? Or?
Well, there was one point it ended up dropping, but I had purchased some standard gloves that I've bought for the past 4 years. They're normally $30 a box for a box of 300. At one point, they went up to $100 a box, which was astronomical. My rep said, "We got to find you a different pair of gloves because this is crazy." He wasn't even comfortable doing that. And now the same gloves are down to 50. So I think just supply and demand, and with something like this pandemic, it's really hard to tell. Atul, you mentioned it earlier. I guess you mentioned there's second waves in other parts of the world now. So that is going to trigger eventually down to us, because I have never been able to acquire a properly fit tested N95 that works. There's lots of KN95s on the marketplace, even some that on this Ontario website that you can purchase from. I've had colleagues buy them and they fail the fit test. So this is going to be definitely an issue. But to answer the question, I definitely, it's just a fact right now. PPE has gone up, so that's going to affect revenues, obviously, because your expenses are higher. I don't anticipate that going down. At some point, I'm sure it will whenever that supply gets reached. But I've been having such a hard time. I've been able to buy hand sanitizer, but you can't find a dispenser for an automatic dispenser for hand sanitizer anywhere. I've called it, have staff call. I ended up getting something from the States. Luckily, I live in a border town. They didn't ship to Canada, so I get it shipped to the border, and then I use a third-party company to bring it back. But I mean, it's definitely in Canada. I think it's harder to get certain types of supplies. For now, though, I usually deal with 1 or 2 dental supply companies. Now I've expanded my horizon to basically all of them, because that's just something that dentists need to do. It was easier before. I had a relationship. I knew the pricing. There was a lot of certainty. Now, even my best guys, they can't get me what I need. And they're telling me, well, look, you got to go somewhere else. They are totally understanding of the situation. So it's definitely something that's going to affect practices for sure.
Yeah, it's in the U.S. The stats that came out with the gowns and the N95s or the shortage. Things have moderated. Like a few of the practices that I've spoken to this week have said it's, they have some supply, but I think the big message is inventory management. You now have to manage that. And before it was like, no problem. We'll just pick up the phone and it'll be here tomorrow. Now you have to see like how many masks do we have, how many do we need, and what's our mask per day. So it's going to become just another layer of practice management at this point over the next 3, 6, 18 months.
Yeah, I agree totally. That was not something that any of my staff or I had to do. We didn't need to keep track of it. The supply was always there. We didn't think twice about it. And I think it's these little things that, depending on your age and your career, just add up. And you're like, I don't want to have to deal with this anymore. I want to be out of this. I don't want to have to manage supply, the liability for having staff and patients in the office, depending on the health of the dentists themselves. It's just all these small little things that add up, and I could very easily see it. I'm obviously not at that point because of my stage of my career, but I could easily sympathize for someone who's on that other end of the spectrum. I don't want to deal with this anymore, and just totally exit completely. It's just too much sometimes. It can be overwhelming, and it just all depends on the person and what their tolerance is.
Okay. Okay, great. Before we move to the next question, I'm going to send a poll here. Are you planning to buy a practice, sell a practice, both, or neither? Next one here. Once again, feel free to have any questions to type in the chat area for your questions. So we have one question here. So it seems that no one is interested in buying my clinic now that the pandemic brought dentistry to a halt, and with all the new guidelines, PPE, and equipment needed. How do I go about finding a buyer and getting them to pay me what I need to retire happily? So I think overall question is, what if someone's selling their practice, what can they do to attract as many buyer as possible to get the attention at this point? You want to start off, Atul, on that one?
Sure. Selling a business requires communication. You need to communicate to the market that you're interested in selling your business. You can do that in many ways. You can communicate that through your existing network, through your dental societies, the dental associations. You can advertise the clinic for sale using your own methods, or you can utilize the services of a company that specializes in selling businesses. You can speak to your colleagues and maybe an associate who's working there about potentially buying your business, or maybe you have a study club in your area, and try that maybe first. But what's important too is to make sure that you've exhausted those steps. And if no one's interested in buying your clinic, I have there is definitely demand out there post COVID. There are people still interested in making offers, and we've seen transactions close post COVID. So the interest in buying your clinic could just be a byproduct of how you're marketing it. And you may want to revisit that strategy and see if you're communicating it to the right people. You can also reach out to the universities in the area and talk to some of the postings out there, University of Toronto, Western, where you can post practices for sale. And you could also consider utilizing a broker to help you in the process. And that's some of the possible ways of communicating and retiring happily. That's a good goal. I like that.
Okay, Alex? Okay, Anthony?
Yeah, just touching on what Alex and Atul mentioned earlier, it's all about your network. I imagine Atul has probably a vast, if he doesn't deal solely in dentists, network of dentists. So a guy like him, that's who I would go to. I would go to my accountant because the accountants are in the know. We were mentioning before, during a pandemic, everyone talks to their accountant. So the accountants are a wealth of information. So like I'm in, especially now these days, I'm sure Atul's been sending emails to all his clients almost daily with market updates and updates of what to do with their clinic and the SERB and all the programs that are out here for small businesses and dental offices. So, you know, professionals like Atul and accountants, they're definitely a good step. Also your sales rep. My sales rep deals with many clinics. Often sales reps know a lot of different areas and different territories, not just the ones they service, or they have, you know, they have their own network of people, and they may be talking to each other and saying, oh, I know so-and-so selling their clinic. Definitely, there's probably someone in your local community, depends on your location, how big it is. Are you in an area where people want to be? If you're very remote, then it might be tough on a good day, let alone a pandemic. I've spoken with other professionals too, and they've given the dentist the option, well, you just may need to work longer. You may need to work an extra year or two, especially in this time, because you might not get what you're wanting. And the same thing is if you're selling to a younger dentist or any dentist, it just depends on financing right now. Are banks willing to finance? So actually, Atul, have you dealt with many of your clients right now that have been able to secure funding, and have a lot of people not been able to secure it at this time?
Funding is still available. The banks are open. They've sort of taken the case-by-case mantra. They've not said no, but they're being cautious about certain situations in terms of, you know, the lever of the debt. Banks are open. The banks are still operating at the same capacity. They're all paying out dividends to their investors. There's been some good news that's come out of the American market as well as the Canadian market in terms of the reopening, and the fact that the dentistry is still seeing a strong resurgence of patients coming back and demand is a good sign. There are other industries which haven't had that same fate, for example, like restaurants. Most of my clients are dentists, and they've had a pretty good couple of weeks, and we are monitoring it. And the banks are going to be, the one thing I haven't seen and I'm waiting for is I haven't seen an appraisal that's been dated after March 15th. I saw one today that was dated late February. So, and that's where you start getting into the whole, like, okay, well, how does that, you know, like, who cares what I did 5 years ago? What am I doing? What's happening now? And, you know, what staff left? Who came back? Well, are they working full time? And all those different variables can change the dynamic of the practices. So we'll have to see how things play out. And but it's an interesting time, and we've seen a lot. The banks, I think, it's really been a lot of the practices that are running full time are actually looking for other support measures through the Business Development Bank of Canada, for example, as a secondary lending source to complement what they have. A lot of them already have a full line of credit, 150, 200,000 that they haven't used. A lot of them already have a pretty good financing position available for their credit card and their term loan, and they feel comfortable with what they have. And they don't necessarily need to buy anything new. They're just looking for more working capital. And it's kind of hard to go back to the bank and fit into their criteria and ask for an increase in the line of credit when you weren't open. So a lot of companies in the last 2-3 months have gone to the Business Development Bank of Canada, which is a federally funded bank, and they have COVID financing available through term loans, through direct injections of cash, and its interest rates are hovering around less than 3%, so still low interest, special COVID rates. So there is, and they don't necessarily need the money. They're just trying to keep some money ready in the event that they may have to close again, or there's a delay, and they can return that money whenever they want without any penalty in a lot of cases. So it's been kind of like a little bit of an emergency fund structure. So, but in terms of buying a practice, I mean, banks are definitely going to sharpen their pencil. There's no doubt about it, and it's all going to be based on the numbers of the recovery, and you know, I would be surprised if they just simply say, okay, show me your production reports from June, and you know, and what does it look like? Because as it stands right now, I mean, we're only like, it's June 17th. It feels like dentistry's only been open for 17 days, but it feels like it's been like 6 months because of all the, just, you know, it's just like every week is like a chapter, and that chapter seems like every day is like a week almost. So it's interesting. It's only been less than, and the first week was kind of like a write-off because everyone was kind of scrambling, and with this whole hygiene, guideline disconnect, I think it's delaying some of that stuff, and it's going to be a very interesting summer.
Okay. Anything to add to that, Alex, before we kind of move to our final topic? A few questions on opening new startups. Yeah, go ahead. Okay, so I just want, since this is my area of expertise, I would say that this is actually a great time. I mean, you have to consider all the other factors that go into play as well, like the location, is it on the ground floor, is it higher floor? Advantage. When any of my clinics, when my clients come on and they have a new practice, I say shoot the video, promote it like crazy because that's your advantage. When COVID hit, that's your angle. Like this is a new practice. You could say this is COVID design practice with all new equipment, with the latest everything. That gives you a huge advantage. And the thing with marketing strategies is that it's like a combination lock. You have to get the right elements in place, then it'll blow up. If I analyze marketing in all areas, and there's always, like in every single neighborhood, there's always about 1, 2, or 3 that figure out the combination lock, and they are just killing it. They get the majority of the patient in the area, and they're kind of neighboring dental offices or just baffled at how they're getting a lineup of new patients, right? The reason they're getting a lineup is that they figure out the combination lock. Whenever there is a new, whenever there's like a new kind of society change or economic change as we're having right now, everything shifts. Certain marketing goes in place, certain ones don't work, like flyers don't work. People don't want to touch things. They don't go into the mail. Digital marketing, digital ad works. Everyone's on YouTube. So there's a shift. And the first office to figure out the combination for the marketing strategy always wins. And we've seen a change. Second thing is technology. Whenever there's a new technology that's introduced, such as Yelp, Google Ads, Facebook, or social media, the dental offices that figure out that combination always win, right? So now we're seeing both. There's technology that's changing. There's society that's changing. Having a new office will give you the advantage. What you need to do is figure out that combination lock. And if you look at the Google rankings for the first 2 listing, so let's say search for a Toronto dentist. The first listing gets 40% of the clicks. The second listing gets 20% of the clicks, right? So that's 60%. And the third one gets about, let's say, 10, 15%. So already 40, 60, 70, 80% goes to the first 3 positions. And that's the exact same thing with marketing. Once you figure out the combination lock, you'll have 40, 50% of the demographics. And this is a perfect opportunity for you to have a startup, but you still need to invest and figure out the combination lock. And so that's my advice with respect to marketing and that new practice. Now, answer to another question is this a good time to invest in starting a new practice? I think it is if you have the right strategy in place and you have the right marketing in place. Will it take a lot longer to pay back bank loans, since once it's open, it may be slow. As we said, in a couple of years, everything will go back to equilibrium, I would say. Anything to add to that, Atul and Anthony?
Sure, I'll just mention, I wasn't sure, was the question they were set on doing it, or they were asking for input, or the pros and cons to each?
Seems like they have, let's just assume they have a startup with the latest technology in place, and let's say they open it right before or right now during COVID.
Well, there's 2 people I talked to, and 2 of them are on this panel, an accountant and a marketing person. The first thing you want to see, if you want to do the accounting, you say, does this make sense? How does this make sense? How can I make this work? I think I commend anyone that starts a new practice. I think it's a lot of work. I think you have to have a certain personality for it to make it successful. And there's no way that can't be done without marketing, because you are going out on a limb. And you definitely need help to do that. We are dentists. We generally know how to deal with patients and people, but we don't know how to acquire patients, especially starting from scratch. So I think you also need to talk to your accountant and your banker. If they're able to secure financing, that might be an issue. You might want to do a comparison as to buy versus start your own. But definitely, like you mentioned, Sharky, things that are just coming up. You obviously want to go into digital because no one's going to want to touch anything these days. So that's a huge part of it. And then exactly, patients are now looking for COVID-ready practices. They're pining for this information. That's what they're seeking, and it's a paradigm shift in the time that we're in. So you definitely have to go towards that. But I would definitely talk with my accountant, and definitely, like I said, two of these guys on this panel, got to talk to an accountant, got to get your numbers ready. And if you've decided to commit to it, you have to get a marketing strategy. And I think you have to be mentally prepared that it's going to be a lot of work. And I think there's probably nothing more satisfying than building something from yourself. So that also depends on just the personality and your stamina and what you're willing to do. So I guess on that, I'll pass it to Atul.
Yeah, definitely the financing is going to be an issue. And in the past, when we were financing, or the banks were financing dental practices from scratch, they were looking at the association position that the dentist held at the same time. And they wanted to know that the dentist was able to sustain a certain amount of income during the first 12 to 24 months from the associateship. Now, that is also now something that's unknown in terms of the demand for associates and how that's going to play out. And I'm sure that's going to be something that the banks are going to take into consideration in their forecast. Because when you start up a dental practice from scratch, they were relying on forecasted financial information that was provided by the dentist in terms of how much income was coming in during the first year and second year from dentistry as associating, and how much income was coming in the first year and the second year and third year, et cetera, from hygiene and income based on the location and et cetera. So without any core data available other than what we've seen in the last 17 days, it might be difficult for banks to understand the cash flow risks associated with income generation and forecasted income that's being generated in the next 2 years in order to approve a request for financing. Now, that doesn't mean that can't be overcome with assumptions and reasonable and supportable assumptions based on the information that we have right now and based on the information that's available in that area. And it could very well just be the supply and demand issue in terms of the dentist to population ratio. In the United States, they have the best information that's come out. A lot of the practices have revamped, and they're seeing calls are coming in, patients are calling, appointments are happening. So there's been resilience in the market. So it's going to be important to also look at your costs. Are your supply costs? What are they going to be as a percentage? We used to use the ODA averages, and those averages are probably going to change a little bit now on the forecast. So it'll also depend on the strength of the borrower and how strong they are. A lot of people have been associating for 3, 4, 5, 6 years. They have a few $100,000 saved up in the bank account, and they've never been really asked to provide any down payment. It's been 100% financed. And that's been great, and it's been a great product that's been available in the market. And that may continue to be the case, but there may be a backstop provision that's built into the financing model to ensure that the banks are protected for any fallback risk associated with any solvency issues in the first 6 to 12 months. The banks have also been able to provide interest-only provisions. And this is also a great time to negotiate with your landlord, because your landlord, you're coming to a new relationship, and I'm sure that they have their own challenges, but you may need to negotiate lease inducements potentially, which is where the landlord will contribute to the cost of the renovation, as well as concessions for interest-only periods, potentially, not interest-only, sorry, rent-free periods, as well as interest-only periods from the bank. But rent-free periods from the landlord for maybe an extended period of time in exchange for possibly a longer-term lease or other concessions, and that's part of the negotiation of starting a practice. And traditionally startup practices, they would start by doing one op or two ops, and then maybe roughing in the other few, and that's something that they likely continue in the construction phase in the startup. So it's the banks are still lending. We did have a case actually downtown Toronto. There was a dentist that had put an offer to buy a property, and they wanted to do a startup, and it was at the bottom of a condo, and it was pretty significant purchase price, and they are now thinking of maybe retracting on that, depending on because it was going to be a significant project. And when I spoke to a bank, they had indicated that they were going to be cautious in that deal because the value of the real estate was really high. There's a lot of maintenance fees associated with it. There was a lot of dentists in that area, and it wasn't clear. This is back about 2 weeks ago, before the opening, and they were still cautious about we'll finance that, no problem, kind of thing. So it's going to be case by case.
Okay. So we're running out of time. So just one final question, kind of quick answer from everyone. What advice would you have for someone that is buying, and what advice would you have someone that's selling? So I'll give you guys a second to think about that while we start our last poll. Thank you everyone for staying all the way till the end. I know this is providing a lot of good information. What stage is your practice currently in? We open with normal hours, we open with modified hours, open only for emergencies, and completely closed still. I have a client who's enjoying golf, and so he's still closed. And also I want to talk about tomorrow we have Dr. Raj Singh. Once again, he's talking about documentation and making it easy, efficient, and complete. He will be showing a system that he's using that is really easy. It can cost your staff quite a bit of time to try to figure things out, keep track of everything, and legally you want to keep track, have good record keeping. So he show you a simple process, a little app with a scanner and tablet that he uses that's pretty amazing and very efficient, will save your staff time. And next week we have Speak with Presence and Charisma to increase case acceptance in the virtual consultations. So due to COVID, everything's becoming virtual. A lot of offices are doing virtual consultations. Most likely will keep on increasing, and some people are a little bit camera shy and a little bit stiff. And so she'll be giving you tips on it. I actually took this course from her, and that's why I invited her on. It's really good, simple tips that you can do. And we have a lot more coming. And you can use the promo code that you got. You'll be redirected after this webinar is over to register for future ones, as well as now you can watch on demand of the past ones. So you can use the same promo code and watch everything in the past as well. So let's start with you, Anthony. What tips would you have for someone that's buying and selling?
Okay, so I think you just have to assess where you are and where you want to be at the current moment. If you've been associating for many years and you have a good associateship and you're looking to buy, might be a good time, either or, might be a good time to find someone who's willing to sell and get into in practice ownership, or it might be a good time to stay where you are. Obviously, it's going to be hard to determine how much work is there going to be for you if you're the associate. Does the principal want to drop their hours, or does the principal want to increase their hours due to all the effects that this has had on their personal situation? As a seller, it's almost the same thing. If you want, I guess, to retire comfortably and easily with pre-COVID numbers, I think you're going to have to hold off for maybe a year or two. And then after, it's also the same thing. You have to ask yourself that question. Do I want to work in this type of environment? Am I at the stage of my career where I can afford to go and maybe not get these higher values that were pre-COVID? So I'm just going to make that really short, and I'll pass it on to either Atul or Alex.
All right, go ahead. Atul.
Yeah, I think, I was talking to a dentist today. He's looking at buying a practice. I said, look, get out there in the market, contact all the brokers and the lawyers and accountants and people that specialize in the industry and let them know that you're looking. Go to some open houses, review some appraisals. I offered to, I said, look, if you get an appraisal, send it to me. We'll go through it. And I can highlight some of the areas of focus in terms of buying a practice, and do due diligence in terms of chart audits and financial reviews and legal reviews and all that stuff. Make sure that all that stuff is taken care of, and it could be a good time. I think it's an interesting time. It's all about timing, and it could be a good time to negotiate, because a lot of people are less likely to be maybe there's it's early in the game, but it could be a great time to kind of put stuff out there. From the deals that we've seen, the buyers have been able to negotiate terms in the agreement that we've never seen before, and the sellers are accepting them, whether there's vendor takebacks or clauses in the provision that allow value prices to be refunded back to the target production, that they would get money back, or they would get a clawback in the valuation. And in terms of selling a practice, still a good time. I mean, there's buyers out there, supply and demand. Just make sure that you're taking advantage of all the tax structures available, lifetime capital gains exemption. Make sure you qualify for that. There's certain qualification criteria. You can test those qualification criteria. You can reorganize your practice if you're still in mid-career to add other family members to optimize on the lifetime capital gains exemption. Or you can crystallize that exemption, even if you're not planning to sell, by doing a corporate reorganization. So all those tax benefits are still available. So it's important to take that into consideration in the timing of the sale. If you're planning on selling, maybe, as Anthony had said, maybe you need to do some retrofitting of your existing procedures and leaseholds to modify the practice to increase the value. And monitor the market. Unfortunately, the market is relatively mostly private, so it's hard to determine where the buy and sell is. But reach out to the real estate professionals that specialize in the area and try and get some information as to what's been happening in the industry. A lot of times, if you make an offer for a practice and you don't get it, you can get some information as to what happened with that transaction ultimately, and whether what that final price was from the listing broker potentially, and that'll give you some insight into what's happening in the transaction.
Okay, Alex. So from a marketing point of view, if you are a buyer, now it's more important than ever to look at the marketing competition landscape to see who is investing money, who's buying ads, how much they're investing, who's at the top of Instagram, Google, and whatnot, to make sure that when you go in, you have an advantage. And I think that's one thing that very few dentists consider when they buy a practice is kind of the marketing competition. They just kind of see the competition out there physically, but there's opportunities on Facebook, there's opportunities on Instagram, there's opportunities in Google Ads, right? Has someone dominated those? I spoke to one dentist. He was in a small town, and he just couldn't do radio ads because radio ads has been dominated, and you just can't get in, right? Whereas if you see an opportunity like online and no one's dominating in your area, that's a big opportunity. So if you're buying, considering the marketing strategy as an important element for you to get new patient, maintain the revenue and cash flow. If you're selling immediately, there's not much you can do with marketing because it does take a while to get right strategy in place. But if you're selling within 1 or 2 years, definitely start figuring out your marketing strategy, start figuring out that combination to dominate the marketing channels, because it will add a lot of value to your practice if you can show that you are getting new patient while other offices are losing patient, and you can say, hey, I figure I just want to thank all the speakers. We took a little bit over the time, but there's a lot of great questions. So I just want to thank all the speakers, Atul, Alex, and Anthony.
Thank you.
To have you guys on. Thank you very much. And thank you everyone for
attending. Thank you for having us.
Okay.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.